Again, good morning and welcome, my dear medical students. In my last lecture, I was talking about the classification of muscles and arrangement of the fasciculus or the muscle cells or the myocytes or muscle fiber in a muscle and according to the action of the muscle. In this lecture, first of all, I will talk about the gross appearance of the skeletal muscle. When I say muscle, it means a skeletal muscle. So, gross appearance of a muscle. The skeletal muscle is formed by two parts and two ends. So it is having two ends and it is divided in two parts. The two ends of a skeletal muscle are origin and the second end is the insertion. A muscle is having two parts. This stable part or the fixed part during the contraction of the muscle is known as origin, especially in cases of the extremities of the body, that is the upper limb muscles and lower limb muscles. So this and which is less movable, stationary or comparatively less movable. This part is known as origin. This part of muscle which is movable or comparatively more movable during the contraction of the muscle is known as the insertion. But in modern anatomy, to avoid the controversies, to avoid the confusion, the name of origin is known as the proximal end of the muscle and the insertion is known as the distal end of the muscle. The name of origin is changed to the proximal part and the part which is known as insertion is changed by the distal end or away from the midline. So skeletal muscle is having the origin or the proximal end which is less movable or comparatively non-movable and also known as the proximal end of the muscle. After crossing the joint, as you all know, hopefully you all know, the skeletal muscles are attached to two or more bones and acting on the joint. The joint is acting as a fulcrum where the distal end is or movable part of the bone is acting as a lever, and due to contraction of this part of muscle, this cord-like or rope-like part of muscle transfers the contraction to the distal part of the joint. So this part is the distal part and this part is the proximal part. The joint is spanned by the muscle, but it is not always true. This proximal part many times, which is stable or stationary during movement, may become immovable, and the distal part, which is comparatively movable and more movable, may become stationary or fixed by some different movements in the same joint. So especially when we see in case of the latissimus dorsi and the biceps brachii muscles, when our arms are held by a chinning bar, the same action is carried by biceps, that is flexion, but the movement of the humerus in this type of movement is away from the shoulder. So origin is not always movable, is not always stationary, and the insertion is not always movable. So to avoid the confusion, this end is known as the proximal end and this end is not known as the distal end of the muscle. Now the muscle is having two parts. This is the one bone and this is the other bone of the joint. And here is the muscle. This part of the muscle is known as the fleshy part or the belly. In my last lecture, I have already told the muscle resembles a shape of a fancied mouse, or due to its resemblance to the little mouse, this is known as musculus or the muscle. So here is the small mouse, and here we can see the tail of the mouse. This part of the muscle, which is thicker and fleshy, is known as the belly or the fleshy part. So this part of the muscle is the belly or the fleshy part of the muscle, and the rope-like or cord-like part of the muscle is known as the tendon. So, contractile part having cross-striated appearance due to arrangement of dark light bands is seen in the belly or the fleshy part of the muscle. But the tendon, always remember, tendon is not a muscle. This part can contract, but this part can't withstand the friction and pressure. So to transfer the contraction and pressure of the muscle to the other part of the joint is carried by the tendon. In my last lecture, hopefully you have already seen this part is having the contraction part and contractile proteins, actin, myosin, tropomyosin and troponin forming the thick filaments and the thin filaments. This part known as tendon transferring the pressure to the other part of the bone is formed by densely regularly arranged collagen fibers, or I can say the tendon is formed by regularly densely arranged dense connective tissue. So the tendon is the part of muscle which is non-contractile, but it can withstand the pressure and the friction. So here is the fleshy part of the muscle. These are the muscle fibers and fasciculus, and this is the rope-like or cord-like part of the muscle. Here you can see regularly arranged dense connective tissue fibers. This part is known as musculo-tendinous junction. This part is the musculo-tendinous junction, or I can say it is known as the myotendinous junction. When I use myo or sarco, I am talking about the skeletal muscle. So the junction between the fleshy part of muscle and the tendon, that is the rope-like or cord-like structure, is known as the musculo-tendinous junction, or I can say the myotendinous junction. What happens at the musculo-tendinous junction? The fibers of connective tissue surrounding the muscle fiber, surrounding the fasciculus and surrounding the whole muscle, that is the endomysium, perimysium and the epimysium, remain continue in the tendon. So the covering of muscle, that is the epimysium, the covering of the fasciculus, that is the perimysium, and the covering of the muscle fiber, that is endomysium, remain continue in the tendon with the connective tissue of the tendon. But the muscle fibers, or I can say the muscle cells, are not continue with the tendon fiber. The muscle fiber and the tendon fiber are not continuous, these are contiguous. Muscle fiber and the collagen fibers of tendon are not continuous, these are contiguous and forming a dovetail appearance. Here I will draw again the fleshy part of muscle and the cord-like or rope-like structure, the tendon. These are the muscle fibers ending here at the myotendinous junction. On the other hand, there are the dense connective tissue fibers in the tendon. These fibers are not continuous, but these are contiguous, but the connective tissue surrounding the muscle fiber, fasciculus and the skeletal muscle proper, that is the epimysium, are continuous. This type of arrangement is known as or called as the dovetail appearance. Dovetail appearance. So what is a tendon? Tendon is a densely, regularly arranged collection of connective tissue, and it is capable to withstand the friction and pressure, which is not done by the fleshy or the belly of the muscle. And this friction and pressure is withstood by the tendon. A tendon having the transverse area or the cross area of 6 centimeter square. If a tendon is having a cross surface area of 6 centimeter square, can tolerate or can carry or can bear a weight of 4,000 to 8,000 kilograms to 8,000 kilograms. So it is very strong structure, and it can bear 4,000 to 6,000 kilograms of weight if it is having 6 centimeter square of surface area in transverse section. So the tendon is a cord-like structure. Fibers are not continuous with the muscle fibers, these are contiguous, and the tendon is having its blood supply from the arteries of the muscle and the vessels and arteries of the periosteum of the bone where the tendon is attached. So it attaches the fleshy part of muscle to the periosteum of the muscle. So it is supplied by the arteries of the fleshy part of the muscle, and some part of tendon is supplied by the periosteal arteries of the bone where the tendon is attached. So tendon is having poor blood supply. In case of severed tendon or the injured tendon, healing is very slow, or in many cases there is no healing in the severed tendon. In that case, surgical interventions are carried to reconstruct the tendon. So tendon is poorly supplied by the blood. The tendons are innervated by the sensory nerves or the sensory axons, and it is having a sensory end organ known as Golgi tendon organ, spindle shaped. And also known as the end sensory organ of the tendon. It is having the collagen fiber as intrafugal fibers, like we can see in the skeletal muscle tendon organ or sensory end organ, and it is innervated by the sensory axons, and the information of stretching in the or the friction or pressure is carried to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord, and it is used to balance the contraction and the tension of the tendon, and it prevents the overstretching of the tendon and rupture of the tendon, which I will talk in my next topic during the nerve supply of the skeletal muscle. The tendon crosses the joint, and it is subjected to the friction by the joints or by the projections, by the skin, by the ligaments, and by the other tendons. To prevent the friction and injury, tearing the injury to the tendon, there are some lubricating mechanics in the tendon. The synovial sheath of joint, the membrane like synovial sheath, is interposed between the bone and the tendon, and it is having a slippery material to prevent the friction of the tendon. So synovial sheath or synovial bursa is collection of fluid bag. Bursa means purse. Purse is interposed between the bone and tendon, between the skin and the tendon, between the two tendons, and between the tendon and the ligament, to prevent the friction and injury to the tendon. These are known as synovial sheath and the bursae. So the lubricating mechanisms of the tendons a tendon is subjected to friction, subjected to injury by the bone due to movement on the joint, by the projection of the bone, by the other tendon, and by the ligaments, or by the skin due to the exposure of the tendon to the external environment. There are some lubricating mechanisms. There are different types of bursae. Latin meaning of bursae is the purse. Sorry. So purse is collection of fluid interposed between the two tendons, tendon and muscle, tendon and joint, or the tendon and bone, and the tendon and the ligament. So these are different mechanisms. First type of bursa is the subtendinous, or first is the tendinous bursa, that is deep to the tendon. The bursa are especially formed in the upper limbs and the lower limbs, or I can say the joints of the upper extremities and the joints of the lower extremities. So here I will talk about the knee joint. This is the distal part. And this is sesamoid bone known as patella. This is the fleshy part of the quadriceps muscle, and here is the tendon of quadriceps. A bursa is formed here, and a bursa is formed here. This bursa is known as suprapatellar, and this bursa is known as the inferior deep patellar bursa. This is interposed between the muscle and the bone, and here you can see between the tendon and the bone. The second type is the articular bursa. This type of bursa are seen in the dance of the axis, that is the second cervical vertebra. You can see between the dance and the transverse ligament of the first cervical vertebra, that is the atlas vertebra. So a bursa is seen between the dance of the axis vertebra. This is the axis, that is second cervical, and this is the atlas, that is the first cervical vertebra. Between the dance of the second, that is the axis vertebra, and between the transverse ligament of the first cervical vertebra, that is the atlas, a bursa is seen. This bursa is articular bursa. Bursa may be subcutaneous. When bursa is seen between the skin and tendon, between the skin and the muscle, is known as subcutaneous bursa. In case of knee, we can see here the skin. A bursa is interposed between the patella and the skin. This is known as pre-patellar bursa. Pre-patellar, or also known as housemaid's bursa, because this bursa is exposed to the floor in the housemaids, so it is known as housemaid's bursa. When this bursa is seen below the patella, it is known as inferior superficial bursa or the clergyman's bursa. So it is known as inferior superficial bursa or known as the clergyman's bursa. The subacromial bursa or the subdeltoid bursa is the largest synovial bursa of the body. Sometimes new bursae are formed in potters carrying weight on shoulder. Between the clavicle and skin, a bursa is developed known as the potter's bursa. These types of bursa are known as adventitious bursa. Adventitious bursa, like potter's bursa, and the tailor's bursa. Tailor's bursa is seen in the talus between the lateral malleolus and the skin. This is also an adventitious bursa. So these are the lubricating mechanisms of the tendons. Now I will talk about the blood supply of a skeletal muscle. Generally, small muscle is supplied by a single artery and drained by two veins, but larger muscles are supplied by two and more than two arteries. So, according to their blood supply, the skeletal muscles are grouped in 5 groups. Group first, second, third, fourth, and the group fifth. When the muscle is supplied by only one artery, these muscles are grouped in group first. The example of group first muscles is the tensor fascia lata, which is supplied by the ascending branch of lateral circumflex femoral artery. The other example in group first muscle is the gastrocnemius muscle, which is supplied by the sural nerve. So the muscles which are supplied by the single artery pedicle, are grouped in group first. The tensor fascia lata supplied by the ascending branch of lateral circumflex femoral artery, and the gastrocnemius which is supplied